All right, part 2, 1840. We're going to go through the whole thing. This year starts with a letter from Hiram Smith on the 2nd of January from Nauvoo. He's received 2 letters describing what Joseph and Elias have done in Washington, and it's exciting progress. So Hiram, describes how commerce is setting up commerce, and Commerce, Illinois is setting up some good business, and things are going well. They're looking up. The next letter we get is from Edward Partridge about new land patents and other bishopy business, along with bunches and bunches of promissory notes. Tons of these things. We get an interesting letter from James Adams, who is a politician responding to Joseph Smith's letter, which we no longer have. So I'm not sure what he was responding to, but it's great because the guy is saying that Mormons are not all that bad and should receive some relief because their cause is understandable. It's pretty clear. It seems to be just. We get a similar letter to John B. Weber, who said that a few of his delegation are in favor of aid for the saints. So they're kind of gathering votes, basically, here. We get a very interesting document here. This is a patriarchal blessing from Joseph Smith, and as far as I know, this is the only one you ever get. This is placed upon the head of James Ivins. Very strange because we already have a patriarch. Joseph Sr. is still alive. He's still doing his thing. And so the only reason it seems that this is included as a legit blessing is because it was taped inside of the patriarchal blessing book. So that's how we think it's legit. And since is kind of a one-of-a-kind thing, I wanted to read it to you. This is a patriarchal blessing that Joseph Smith gave. So here it goes. Patriarchal blessing of James Ivins. Dear brother, I lay my hands upon thy head in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, and bless thee with a patriarchal blessing, in virtue of the authority of the holy priesthood invested in me, and thou shalt be blessed. Thy children shall also be blessed in the earth, and they shall minister to the children of men with power and great glory. And thine eyes shall see it. Thou shalt be blessed with long life, and to live to a good old age. And thou shalt see thy children's children unto the second or third generation, for thou hast a blessed family, and they shall be blessed in the earth unto the latest generation. And thou shalt hear the voice of the Son of Man, saying unto thee, Son, thy sins are forgiven thee, and angels shall minister unto thee, because of the honesty of thy heart before the Lord. And it shall come to pass that in after time the holy priesthood shall be sealed upon thine head, and thou shalt be blessed in thy basket and in thy store, and in thy soul and in thy body, in thy goings out and in thy comings in. And the Lord will bless thee in the land, and thou shalt be found at the right hand of God. The Ancient of Days shall stretch forth his hand to receive thee, and thou shalt minister before him. I now bless thee with the blessing of Abraham and Isaac and of Jacob over. Let's turn the page over. And now I seal thee up unto eternal life, and pronounce these blessings upon thy head in the name of Jesus Christ of Nazareth, even so. Amen. January 7th, 1840, by Joseph Smith, Jr., first president of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. There you go. Now, this could qualify, just so that you know, as maybe a calling or an election made sure, but I'm not sure if it's a calling and election made sure, but he seals up this man to his exaltation. So that's a very interesting patriarchal blessing, and the only one that we get from Joseph Smith. After this, we get minutes of a meeting in Philadelphia where they decide on publication efforts. So they're starting a new Book of Mormon edition. And for the church, and also Joseph gives a discourse about traveling elders should not be interfering with the efforts of the presiding authorities, the people who are standing ministers in the area they are preaching in, which is held to this day. Like missionaries just can't go in there and override, bishops and stake presidents and things like that. Now we get into one of the reasons why I wanted to show this to you in the first place. This whole idea of like wacky stuff that you get from the Joseph Smith papers. Here we go. We, and I'll just add to here, just to show you how much I love you. I've been giving you unpublished revelations. We get fun letters, we get detailed stories, we get a lot of corroboration about marvelous things that have happened. But now we get what's called a phrenology chart. And if you're not sure with what phrenology is, it was this idea that parts of your head could be sort of lumpy and measured in certain ways, and it would tell you basically what your personality was, what your strengths and weaknesses were, and how to improve yourself. So Joseph goes to see somebody by the name of Alfred Woodward in Philadelphia, who measured the prophet's head to find out his character traits. This was a very popular trend in the 1830s, and people used to use this to learn about themselves, what they can improve, and I will let the historical introduction take it from here. It says, while Joseph Smith did not score particularly low in any area, he scored especially high in individuality and a few other qualities of perception. No key to the 20-point scale is included with these documents. We don't know if is this good or bad. It is possible that Joseph Smith received a key that is no longer extant. It is also possible that Woodward made a key available at an additional cost and Joseph Smith declined to purchase it. Joseph Smith apparently retained and carried these charts while traveling in the eastern United States and brought them back to Illinois by late February 1840. Other church members, including John Taylor, made copies of both charts sometime after they were created, and it is unclear what Joseph Smith thought about phrenology at the time, though he later expressed negative opinions about it. And I will share those with you later in this episode. So there you go, phrenology. And it's more or less like a palm reading for the prophet Joseph Smith, so it's kind of fun. Moving on, we get affidavits about who owned what land in Missouri as part of an effort in Washington to say, hey, these lots belong to these people. That's where, when we're talking in remuneration and redress, this is where things should go. We get a letter to the editor of an unknown newspaper describing some Latter-day Saint beliefs, and it is signed by Joseph Smith. We get a letter to Emma letting her know that he is coming home soon and that he really, really misses his family. That's written in his own hand. I'm skipping through this because we're only in winter still. We get a memorial to the United States Senate and House. It is 27 pages long, which enumerates the full story of Missouri attacks, the extermination order, the mobbing, the Liberty Jail incident, all the crimes that were going unpunished. And now I'm going to read the whole thing. That's not true. I'm not going to read the whole thing. This memorial was presented to the Senate, and the Missouri senator wanted it thrown out. He wanted it tabled forever. He felt like it put Missouri on trial against the rest of the United States. And I don't know, frankly, my personal feeling is, yeah, I think that was very deserved. I think that's a very acute observation, sir. The memorial prevailed and was read in the chamber. So this was actually read out to the senators. It led to a vote where it would be put into the Committee on the Judiciary, and they would report their findings. So I'll let the historical introduction tell the rest of the story here. The report stated that the committee members, so they go to committee and the committee promises to make a report. Here's what it says. The report stated that the committee members have not considered themselves justified in inquiring to the truth or falsehood of the facts charged in the petition, and that the petitioners must seek relief in the courts of judicature in the state of Missouri. I think that's like the judiciary, anyway, or of the United States. The report also included a recommendation that the committee be discharged from considering the memorial any further. The Senate passed the recommendation as a resolution on the 23rd of March, 1840, meaning it needs to go back to your local judge. We will do nothing. Therefore, Mr. Smith went to Washington after being rejected by the judge, the governor, then the president of the United States, and now Congress. All rejected, no relief of any kind. Everybody got away with it scot-free. So congratulations, you got away with it. You got land, you got a bunch of stuff from that. And no one at any level of government did a single thing. So that is according to the Senate records. So there you go. After this, we get a ton of promissory notes. We get After this, we get a lot of promissory notes. We get some town lot orders. We get some bonds. We get a discourse recorded by Matthew Davies, who was writing to his wife. This is just kind of a random guy who was writing to his wife about an experience he had. Joseph preached a lot in D.C. and apparently drew large crowds, including some political figures. Joseph, in this case, on the 5th of February, spoke for 2 hours and talked about LDS teachings, the fall of Adam, the restoration of the gospel, the rejection of the idea of infant baptism, and a lot of the injuries to the Latter-day Saints. Matthew liked what he heard, but he didn't go much farther than that. We do have this letter somehow in church custody, and it was given to the church as early as 1945. So we're not sure what the path was for that, but there it is. We have this random letter. Elias Higbee stays around in Washington and attends to a lot of committees, and he's trying to keep this fight alive. He tried to preach privately where he could, but at the end of the day, the states' rights argument seemed to prevail over doing something for these citizens, which, again, we can be snotty about this all day long, but I think, putting yourself back in this time, it could have been a very legitimate reason at the time. States were a lot more independent and a lot more free-flowing than now. The United States is very federalized. It's very like, oh, there's an overarching government for this. Back in the day, that was really not the case. And a lot of it is just how you're going to do it today with, communication being what it is and travel being what it is, that's possible. But back then, not really. So I think there might have been some legitimate reasons for this, as harsh as that may be. The next Washington report we get was a discourse from Joseph Smith in Illinois that finds its way to the New York Journal of Commerce. Joseph clearly didn't like Martin Van Buren, and so in all of this, we get tons of notes and transactional documents. We have a slew of land transactions, bonds, notes. We get minutes and discourses from March 6th, where it was decided not to live the law of consecration in Illinois. How's that? Joseph Smith writes a letter to Elias Higbee commending him for his efforts. We get a lot of letters going back and forth about the Washington efforts and updates from the Capitol. We get a general conference on April 6th and 8th where they read out the failure of their petition to Congress, but they sort of resolve to keep fighting, keep petitioning, keep getting affidavits to try to get their government to help them. Much more happens, but some things of note from this general conference. We get Frederick G. Williams readmitted into the church. He expresses sorrow for his actions, and it seems sincere, and so he is allowed back in. And I mean, Frederick G. Williams, this was a member of the first presidency, so kind of a crazy time. Anyway, we get missionary reports. We get some trainings. We get some observations to the elders as they go out on the missions. So that's the April conference of 1840. We get a letter of recommendation a little while later for Orson Hyde, which this turns into the very famous mission I was speaking to earlier in the episode about how he goes from here, from, sort of Illinois, he goes to London, he goes to Amsterdam, Constantinople, and Jerusalem. And he's sort of got this letter that says, I'm an official minister of the Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saints. The famous portion of this is that he actually does eventually get to Jerusalem, and he dedicates the land by the power of the priesthood for the gathering of the Jews in the last days. And kind of the house of Israel, really. But this will be a physical gathering place. What I love about this is a painting of this event is actually in the lobby of the Missionary Training Center in Provo, Utah. So as you walk in, one of the first things you see is this painting. And it should also be stated that there's an Orson Hyde Park that is maintained by the church. And if you don't know, BYU actually has a Jerusalem center in that same area, which is overlooking Jerusalem. It's a very gorgeous place. I've never been. I've always wanted to go there, but it kind of opens and closes as, conflicts in the area heighten or whatnot. We then get a discourse from Joseph Smith explaining his disappointing meeting with Van Buren, where he says, quote, he had always believed Mr. Van Buren to be a high-minded statesman and had uniformly supported him as such, but he now saw that he was only a Hud-suckering politician who would sacrifice any and everything to promote his reelection, unquote. Not a fan of Martin Van Buren. And actually, I mean, if you read the history of Martin Van Buren too, there's a lot of people who kind of felt the same way about him. So I don't know. Maybe he's right. Maybe he's hurt. Who knows? There are a few meetings. We get resolutions. We get licenses. We get agreements. We get a bazillion licenses. We get a ton of notes. And then we get a few letters from Brigham Young giving a report of their progress in England. They made it. They mentioned they need more hymn books. Thought that was interesting. Orson Hyde writes a letter asking for permission to publish the Book of Mormon in German because he is learning German because he was in Germany. Joseph Smith writes back to Orson Hyde and John E. Page and gives permission for the Book of Mormon translation and praises them and Providence and, the Lord sort of for their success in the missionary field. We get similar letters to Heber C. Kimball and others. We actually get a marriage license that Joseph Smith performed for his sister Lucy, who married a man by the name of Arthur Milliken. We get pay orders, documentation for stuff. Then we get a memorial to the Nauvoo High Council. This is 3 pages long. Basically, it is Joseph asking to be relieved from the job of selling land and doing temporal things because he can't really do the rest of his calling because, like the spiritual stuff, because he's spending all of his time sort of running a business. So all of these promissory notes, these land deals, the church, all that kind of stuff was really, they bought a lot of this land from Isaac Galland. They were doing their best to drain the swamp. And more or less by the time it was all over, what they were really trying to say, hey, we bought it for this much. We're going to sell it to you for a little more. We're going to raise money. We're going to pay debts. We're going to do the right thing. So 2 meetings follow this that resolved to have Henry G. Sherwood take over this. And also a man by the name of, I believe it's Allinson Ridley. Maybe I'm saying that wrong. Anyway, those 2 are going to be the agents that take over the land deals in the Illinois area. All right. We also get a memorial and a meeting enumerating the prison time that Joseph and his compadres went through, and so forth as well. We do get a letter from W.W. Phelps. Okay. He's been excommunicated twice. We have a letter saying, take a long walk off a short bridge and never talk to me again, right? But it includes also some other additional sort of writings from Orson Hyde and John E. Page on this, and it begs forgiveness and asks to be readmitted. W.W. Phelps is readmitted into fellowship again after a lot of hard feelings were exchanged. We get a letter to Frederick Kessler. He came by and wanted to visit Joseph Smith, but Joseph wasn't at home, so Joseph sends him a letter and says, hey, sorry I missed you, basically. Then we get a meeting setting out how Joseph was to leave the temporal affairs and kind of how Allinson Ridley and Henry Sherwood were supposed to take over land sales and so forth. So there's kind of here's how you're supposed to be doing this, and there's a meeting sort of enumerating what that is. After this, we get a letter to the Crooked Creek, Illinois branch to authorize them to start a stake, which is kind of fun. We get a very, very long letter from Heber C. Kimball talking about their journeys, their successes in England, bearing their testimonies. After this, we get minutes of meetings. We get a discourse from Joseph Smith, which states that Zion is all of North and South America. All of that landmass is considered the physical land of Zion. Interesting idea. And that there's going to be a temple in Nauvoo, which will be, quote, great a temple as ever Solomon did, if the church will back me up, unquote. That's on the 19th of July, 1840. All right. We get a very famous letter from Joseph to W.W. Phelps. So this is in response to W.W. Phelps asking for forgiveness. I want to come back. I'm very sorry about what I've done. It makes it clear that William did some very serious harm to the church. But he seems sincere, and he was welcomed back into fellowship in the church. And it ends with a couplet that a lot of people have heard, and I love this language. Come on, dear brother, since the war is past, for friends at first are friends again at last. So a very nice way to forgive and hopefully forget. Although I will say in this case, I think it stuck, and William W. Phelps did make it for the rest of his life as a member of the church. All right, after this, we get a number of letters describing the goings-on of the various branches. John C. Bennett sort of shows up. He starts writing about his doings in the military, what sorts of mottos and ideas that Nauvoo could incorporate. This man will later become the mayor of Nauvoo and will be very instrumental in not only setting up Nauvoo as a city, but also in the murder of Joseph Smith. So take him, the good and the bad as they come. We get minutes of meetings where various people bring disputes over conduct, money, and these are all sort of resolved in the church court system. We get more letters that follow. We get so many receipts. Holy cow, receipts galore. Then we get an interesting letter from Thomas Bullock about a mission to the native tribes and various successes there, which started fueling rumors that there was this Mormon-Indian collaboration and such. So yeah, I mean, he was out doing his thing, and a couple of native members came from that, which is interesting. Brigham Young writes from England. He speaks a lot about the poverty of most of the people in Britain, just kind of the squalor that they were living in, and it's pretty true at the time. This sort of early 1800s England is not a very pretty place. Talks a lot about their great successes, and they have a big need to publish the Doctrine and Covenants out of England, and this kind of becomes a thing. Liverpool especially is a place where the Journal of Discourses was originally published. So Britain becomes this sort of, how would you say it, sort of a a publishing hub of the church for a little while is actually in England. We get a meeting, which is going to try Almond Babbitt for talking crap, basically, about Joseph Smith and others. The charges are dropped. They're reconciled. After that, we get some receipts and licenses. They continue to flow. We get a letter from Samuel Bent and George W. Harris that explains that the poverty of the saints in sort of the surrounding areas of Ohio and Illinois and Indiana are prohibiting them from donating to the publication efforts of the church. So he's like, don't get mad at us. We're trying, but we just don't have a lot of money to donate to the church right now, which is a great way to go. Just talk it through, right? We don't need to be mad at each other. John E. Page and Orson Hyde continue to report on their mission by sending some letters. Then we get a public letter to the saints scattered abroad in September of 1840. This is published in the Times and Seasons, and this is kind of a regular thing to send big kind of general epistles to the saints around the area. They've sort of codified it a little more at this point. But it gives an inspirational tone. It talks about the missionary efforts in England and so forth. And they talk about a Nauvoo temple project. That is sort of the announcement. We're going to build a temple in Nauvoo. And we're going to start publishing new editions of the Book of Mormon and the Doctrine and Covenants, which eventually did come to pass. Robert B. Thompson actually is the one that writes this and does it by the order of the first presidency. So we get that in the church paper. We get receipts, we get paperwork galore, and then we get to the October conference of 1840, which was very well attended. Apparently, they said it was like the biggest attended meeting they've ever had. And there's talk of the temple with people working voluntarily 1 day in 10 to get the work done. So they start, again, codifying a method of doing this. And so, yeah, basically you're tithing your days. So 1 day in 10, you would volunteer and work on the temple. We get some new stakes being organized around, like Ramus was one that we already talked about. Joseph preaches a discourse on the idea of baptism for the dead. Big deal here. A lot of the apostles are off on their missions right now, but this is a major deal where not only can you, get baptized, receive the gift of the Holy Ghost and all of these blessings that the saints get, but your kindred dead can be a part of this as well. They're not considered like, hey, we've got all these members of the church, but they're just, you're going to, baptize them for the dead. They can choose whether or not they want to accept that. A very, very major, big, huge, central focus of what the temple really is. But it's also a very new idea for these members. So they're trying to kind of sort out what it is. The next is a report of the first presidency in the Times and Seasons that explains the successes of the church in England, the need to print the scriptures in Nauvoo, and the start of a paper in England called the Millennial Star. And I don't know if you know about the Millennial Star, but that was the sort of non-American church paper. Also some successes in the southern states in the U.S. We get a few more licenses, and then we get something called Instruction on the Priesthood. It's around the 5th of October, which was read in this general conference by Robert Thompson. The historical introduction is kind of remarkable. Howard Corey later remembered witnessing Joseph Smith dictate the statement specifically for presentation at the October conference, meaning Joseph Smith likely composed the document shortly before Thompson read it on the 5th of October. According to Corey, Joseph Smith dictated it after unsuccessfully examining or hunting in the manuscript of the New Testament, of the New Translation, of the Bible for something on priesthood. Corey recalled that Joseph Smith gave the instruction during a revelatory moment in which, quote, the Spirit of God descended upon him and a measure of it upon me, insomuch that I could fully realize that God, or the Holy Ghost, was talking through him, unquote. So it's kind of a fun moment of what is it like to be in the presence of Joseph Smith while he's receiving inspiration. So there you go. And that was written down by Howard Corey and read aloud in conference by Robert B. Thompson. On the sermon details, we get this. The instruction built on earlier revelations and statements about the priesthood, echoing an 1832 revelation, as well as instruction Joseph Smith prepared for the probable assistance of Oliver Cowdery in 1835. The document briefly described the two major divisions of the priesthood, the Melchizedek priesthood and the Aaronic priesthood. In summer of 1839, Joseph Smith preached a sermon that covered a number of similar themes, discussing the division of time into dispensations, and stating that Old Testament figures such as Adam and Elijah would help restore priesthood authority in a final dispensation in the last days. In that sermon, Joseph Smith argued that the renewal of ancient ceremonies would accompany the restoration of priesthood authority. In this circa 5th of October 1848 instruction, Joseph Smith stated that even animal sacrifice, as practiced in the Old Testament, would be restored in the last days, in keeping with biblical prophecy. Joseph Smith also instructed the saints on the doctrine of translation, a power that enabled individuals to live in a transformed state of being until the second coming of Jesus Christ, and that he said belonged to the Melchizedek priesthood. The doctrine of translation was not unique to Joseph Smith and his teachings. The basic concept is articulated in the New Testament's epistle to the Hebrews, which states that, quote, by faith Enoch was translated that he could not see death, unquote. According to contemporary Methodist theologian Adam Clarke, this passage teaches that Enoch, quote, did not die, and that God took him to a state of blessedness without obliging him to pass through death, unquote. Joseph Smith diverged from such 19th century theologians by teaching that translated beings serve as ministering angels unto many planets, and by emphasizing these beings' connection to the priesthood. In addition to these themes, Joseph Smith discussed the patriarchal nature of the priesthood, something that had been discussed in earlier revelations and instructions. We get a letter to members of the church in Kirtland, encouraging them and letting them know that Alman Babbitt is going to hold the keys of the house of the Lord there, basically meaning he is the new temple president at Kirtland, basically. So that's kind of fun. We get a little letter to Newell K. Whitney asking for some wood for his office fireplace because it is December 12th and he's cold. So that's a little note that Joseph sends off to Newell K. Whitney. Then we get a bill presented to the state legislature of Illinois to incorporate the church. Now, this is kind of a weird one because since the law of Illinois gave certain powers to religions, they changed it to just saying, oh, you can have a notary in Nauvoo. So Joseph just kind of made himself Joseph the sole trustee of the church, and that actions were recorded in the state records about 3 days later. So that was easy. And a lot of that just was like, Illinois already kind of had some laws for protections for churches, and, you don't really need to go crazy on that. So it was kind of an easy thing for them. So a little luck in a rare moment. We get an agreement with Don Carlos and Ebenezer Robinson for stereotypes of the Book of Mormon plates for printing. And what this means, and I've spoke to this many episodes ago, but just to say again, when you're printing, when you're doing press printing, what you're doing is putting these metal letter types, and you make your little words, right? And you do your thing there. And so instead of having to do that over and over and over again, what you do is you come up with plates that fit into the same spot. They have all the letters on them, and it's fixed, and it fits into the shape that you want because it's easier for you to deal with, which is why we stereotype people by saying, I just need you to fit into this box. It's easier that way. That's what stereotyping is. So it's stereotyping. It's fixed typing. So you get a plate, you just pop it into place, you press a bunch, you move on to the next set, the next gathering, as they would call it, and that's how they would do it. So they just got those struck, as they say, and that was what it was. Then after that, we get a letter from Joseph. He writes it to the 12, and it is written sort of at a crossways form, as you can see here, to allow more text on one page. It's kind of a clever idea if you think about it. So basically, you read it horizontally, and then you can turn it and read it vertically, which is kind of interesting. Anyway, so you can see that here. But this is a letter to the 12 while they're out. It answers some questions, talks about affairs at home, and reveals the upcoming Nauvoo Temple project, and announces the death of Joseph Smith Sr. So the patriarch has passed away, and Hiram Smith is now the new patriarch of the church, sort of a lineage thing at the time. And again, this continued until recent times. I believe it was, 2016 or 17, 18, something like that, where the last line of these general church patriarchs, which that calling is no longer a thing, passed away. And Thomas S. Monson was there for that. I think he was like 112, kind of crazy. But anyway, the last of those patriarchs has recently passed away as of this recording, which is 2025. All right, so that's that letter. Then we get an act to incorporate the city of Nauvoo. This is a big deal. This is on the 16th of December, 1840. It is a very lengthy document. Our earliest copy is printed in the Times and Seasons, but the Thomas Bullock copy looks a lot better, in my opinion. So I'm going to show you that one as well. We also get a copy in the laws of the state of Illinois, which is fun. So that is still on the books as an incorporated town. It goes over voting. It goes over taxes, city administrations, courts, juries, judicial powers, punishing crimes, all sorts of stuff. Lots going on there. We get a meeting where Robert D. Foster is acquitted of charges. And we get another discourse about detecting good and evil spirits, which I've already discussed once, but this is kind of like over and over happening where it's like, hey, if you can shake a hand, great. If they refuse to shake your hand, great. But if they do shake your hand and you don't feel anything and it's kind of like ghost up in here, then that is apparently Satan or a satanic spirit. So good to know. Keep that in the back pocket. Anyway, thus ends 1840. And our next part, we're going to get into just January of 1841. So this contains a couple of things, and then section 124 of the Doctrine and Covenants, which is where we will stop our episode for today. So stick around. I am trying to talk through this as concisely as I can. I hope I'm doing a good job. So yeah, stay with us.